Fallout, one of my favorite franchises of all time. I still remember my first time loading up Fallout 3 and being instantly hooked on the game thanks to the incredible introduction. This resulted in me abandoning all my jobs and responsibilities just so I could play Fallout 3 more. Not like I had many jobs and responsibilities at the age of 12, but nevertheless, I was addicted. I finished the game multiple times just so I can get all the different endings, and like a true addict, I was itching for more. So you should have seen my face when Fallout New Vegas was released. I forced my mum to go to the nearest game shop with me and persuaded her to buy Fallout New Vegas for me, basically by saying that it's like some sort of science game and it's 100% for kids. So there I was on the drive home with my mum, Fallout New Vegas box in hand, flicking through the instruction manual, and when I tell you it was the longest drive home I've ever experienced, I'm not lying. But it all paid off when I got home and loaded up the game. I don't even understand how it's possible, but Fallout New Vegas was better than Fallout 3. I really wish I still had my old PS3 just so I could see how many hours I put into the game. I'm guessing it's probably somewhere in the thousands. And after I've done every little thing the game had to offer, I had nothing to play. For years to come, all I had was mid-Activision titles and empty Ubisoft worlds to explore. Gaming just kind of felt boring. Until E3 2015. Bethesda's doing its first ever E3 presentation and rumors of a new Fallout game. I cleared my schedule and I was ready. I had my popcorn, snacks, and I was watching it. The man, the myth, the legend, Todd Howard walks onto the stage wearing his iconic leather jacket and out of nowhere announces a game that's more ambitious than anything I've ever seen before. I literally could not believe my eyes. Fallout Shelter, a mobile base building game set in a Fallout universe. Oh, sorry. Wrong script. That's for another video. We got our first look at Fallout 4, and the game looked amazing. Todd introduced us to the world, showed off new mechanics, and he dropped the biggest bombshell, no pun intended, and announced that Fallout 4 was coming out in a couple of months, November that year. I ran across the room, grabbed my wallet, and just threw it at the screen and begged Todd to take my money. And the year now is 2022, 7 years since Fallout 4 released, and I've never even completed a single playthrough. Not until now, at least for this video. Why? Is Fallout 4 that bad? Or was there simply just too many amazing games out at the time? Before we discuss Fallout 4 as a game itself, let's focus on the second question first. Let's talk about the gaming market in 2015. Fallout 4 released into one of the busiest years in gaming ever. So in order to get the attention of the gamers, it would have to work a little bit harder, purely because there was just so much competition. Witcher 3, Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain, Bloodborne, Arkham Knight, Mad Max, Dying Light. Yep, all of them games came out in 2015. And don't get me wrong, Fallout 4 was not a commercial flop at all. In fact, it sold 13 million units, which is the most any game has done in the franchise. However, I think Fallout fans prefer to go to the older games to scratch that Fallout itch due to the fact that Fallout 4 was simply controversial. And I don't mean that in some sort of scandalous PR way. What I mean is that Fallout 4 split the fanbase in half. This is because Bethesda really tried to innovate with Fallout 4. They introduced a whole bunch of new mechanics and changed old mechanics, and the reaction to that was mixed. Basically, there's two groups of people. You either love Fallout 4 or you hate it, and there's no in between. And I think I'm in the first group, not because I think all the changes introduced are great and make the game better, but because I respect Bethesda for having the balls to try something new. So is Fallout 4 a good game? I'll attempt to answer this question by listing everything the game did good, everything the game did bad, and everything about the game that is clapped. Let's start with the good. Before we get into the real meat of what makes this game good, I think we just have to get the obvious out the way. Art direction. The art direction in Fallout 4 is just immaculate. The retro futuristic vibe is just so good. And I think it really sets Fallout as a franchise apart from other open world RPGs, purely because there's nothing like it. And the art direction really gets to shine, especially during the introduction to the game. This is because the intro to the game is set before the bombs drop, so you really get to see how colorful and vibrant the world is supposed to be. You get to see all the furniture and equipment still intact and working. The lawn outside is perfectly cut. Your robot butler is literally shiny from how polished he is. On a quick side note, I really wish Bethesda done a DLC that's set entirely in the pre-war era, just because I think the intro is a little bit short and I just can't get enough of it and I want more. But the art direction holds up through the entire game. Once the intro is done and the bombs drop and the whole world goes to hell, the retro futurism mixed with the post-apocalyptic is a really weird mix, but for some reason it just works perfectly. And I really think the improved graphics of Fallout 4 serve the art direction really well. For the first time in the franchise, the world is colorful and vibrant, which just makes that retro futuristic aesthetic pop so much more. And it's really nice to actually see some color in the world, especially when you compare it to previous entries in the franchise, which were either really green, like Fallout 3, or really brown, like Fallout New Vegas. Quickly speaking of comparisons to the older games, I love the Pip-Boy in Fallout 4. Seeing the Pip-Boy fully animated with your character flicking switches and pressing pressing buttons when you're interacting with the menus makes using a Pip-Boy just feel so much more immersive. Oh, and also I love the little detail of the little Pip-Boy mascot being animated in the quest menu with relevant animations to the specific quests. It's a small detail, but it's a nice touch from the devs. Music. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the music in Fallout since everyone knows it's amazing, and Fallout 4 is no different. I had Diamond City radio blasting the entire time I was exploring the Commonwealth, and it was just banger after banger after banger. Again, I really wish they'd done some sort of a DLC that added more songs to the radio, because although the music is amazing, there's not much of it. But again, the music is just so good, I don't really care. Also, this might be a little controversial take, but I've really enjoyed the new host for the radio. Travis Miles just had me laughing with his awkwardness. And yes, I know he's not as good as Free Dog from Fallout 3, but I think I just relate to Travis a little bit more because both him and I are awkward goblins that sit in one room talking to a microphone all day. One little gripe that I do have with the music in this game is that for some reason when you engage with dialogue with another character, the music doesn't automatically turn down. And this was a little bit annoying because at times I simply couldn't hear what the other person was saying because all I could hear was Rocket 69, Rocket 69. Exploration and world design. Probably the most impressive thing about Fallout 4 is the world. I tip my imaginary fedora to Bethesda for designing an incredible world that swallows you up the moment you leave the vault. Although Fallout 4's map is not the biggest in the franchise when it comes to square mileage, it's by far the most densely packed map, to the point where it almost becomes too dense in the city as there are too many markers and locations for you to explore. And I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit overwhelmed when I stepped into the city and every direction I faced in there was like 50 markers on my radar and I was like, what do I do? But it just goes to show you how much content Bethesda packed into this map. You feel like almost every building that you see you can go into and find some loot or a secret, and this is what Bethesda are the masters of. Handcrafted worlds that don't force you to explore them, but you just can't resist the urge to go off the beaten path and see, oh, what's over that hill? What's in that bunker? This is why the main story of Fallout 4 is only 25 hours to beat, but not a single person ended up with under 80 hours on the first playthrough. Because you just want to explore the world. And you definitely get rewarded for exploration. Because some of the best content Fallout 4 has to offer is not in the main quest, but you'll just randomly stumble upon it. Like this one little location that I found, and it just stuck with me because I find it so funny, where you find this random lift that goes up into a hideout on top of a ruined overpass. And once you're at the top, you find this cute little house, and it has a terminal inside it with a diary from a survivor detailing how they love this hideout since it's really high up so they feel safe. They are kind of worried about falling since they tend to get drunk on most nights. And I thought to myself, where is the survivor? So I started looking around the hideout and I didn't see anything until I looked over the edge and I found his body plastered on the floor with a bottle of vodka in his hand. And this didn't happen in the quest. It wasn't even a marked location on the map. I just randomly found it. And I bet you a huge portion of the players never even saw this location. But that's the great thing about Fallout. Everyone's playthrough is going to be completely different, and you yourself can have multiple playthroughs and every time it will be different. Another amazing thing about Fallout 4's world is the environmental storytelling. Like I mentioned in the example above, I love stumbling onto the scene and trying to piece together what happened without being told or having any exposition. And this is done especially well in the vaults. These vaults have been constructed by Vault Tech, which promised people before the war that the bunkers would protect them from the nuclear explosions, but every single vault was carrying a secret scientific experiment. And my favorite vault in Fallout 4 has to be Vault 95. This vault is just randomly hidden on the outskirts of the map, so there's a huge chance that you might miss it on your playthrough, but the story of it is just so interesting. So Vault 95 was occupied by drug addicts, and one vault dweller was a Vault Tech employee. All the vault dwellers were put in a rehabilitation program that lasted 5 years, just to make sure that everyone is clean. And on the 5th anniversary on the dot, the secret Vault Tech employee opened up a hidden stash that had alcohol, drugs, everything, you name it. And this is where the experiment of the vault truly begins. The experiment is to see how quickly a recovered drug addict would give into temptation. And as you can imagine, the outcome was not pretty. As you explore the ruins of the vault, you find terminals which contain diary entries from every occupant, but you'll just find random bodies throughout the vault, even in the bathrooms, that have bottles of alcohol next to them, used up needles, and it is kind of sad. And the crazy part is, all of this isn't attached to some sort of a quest. You can just randomly stumble upon it, explore it, and figure out the story. And this is why the vaults are by far my favorite thing about the entire Fallout franchise. Finding these secret bunkers scattered around the world that have deep, dark stories within them, but they are never shoved in your face with a location marker on the map or a quest. They're entirely optional. And that's why exploration in Fallout 4 is just so amazing, because you could be just randomly walking around, bumping into this secret vault, and then spending the next half an hour inside it trying to figure out what exactly went wrong down there. Oh, I just love the vault so much. I could probably make like a standalone video talking about the lore of each vault and the experiment within it. They're just that good. Factions. The factions you meet in Fallout 4 are fantastic. There's 4 main factions that are related to the story of Fallout 4. You've got the Brotherhood of Steel. That's the cool army people that have the power armors. The Minutemen, which were the guardians of the Commonwealth, but have fallen since and need your help rebuilding. Obviously, you do this by liberating settlements.
Gotten word about a settlement that's being threatened by raiders.
The Railroad, which is an underground secret faction that believe that simps deserve to live, and the Institute, a super sci-fi and advanced faction that has the capability to teleport and make robots that are basically indistinguishable from humans. All these factions are really fleshed out and have their own lore. However, I found the Brotherhood of Steel and the Institute to be the most compelling, and that's probably why I focused on their quest lines the most. Because how can you not like a secret organization that's kidnapping people and replacing them with robots, or the goddamn army that has power armors and vertibirds and a goddamn blimp? But then you also get smaller factions. Again, these guys are totally optional and aren't really related to the main story quest, but are still interesting nevertheless. You have the Atom Cats, which are basically greasers obsessed with decking out their power armors as if it was some kind of hot rod. You have the Triggermen, which are basically your typical American gangsters, and they all wear suits for some reason, and there's loads more. But the one that interested me the most was for Children of the Atom. Like, the name alone sounds pretty cool, but the lore is even cooler. Children of the Atom are a religious cult built around the worship of radiation and nuclear annihilation as a vehicle of creation and life. Basically, they are obsessed with nuclear bombs and they worship the radiation. Pretty cool. And yes, I know we see them in Fallout 3. They are featured quite heavily in Fallout 4, especially if you go exploring. I'm not going to spoil what happens, but at one point in the story, you find the Children of the Atom in a certain location and you're like, what are you doing here? How are you here? This makes no sense. What? Gunplay. Bethesda made improving the gunplay in Fallout 4 their top priority, and this is evident because they teamed up with id Software to improve the shooting mechanics. And if you don't know who id Software is, it's this little indie studio that developed this little indie title called Doom. And I'm glad Bethesda did this, because up until Fallout 4, the shooting and the gunplay was basically a running joke in the community for how bad it was, to the point where you'd almost avoid combat where possible. But this is different in Fallout 4. I actually kind of liked the shooting. Heavy weapons such as the snipers, shotguns, and assault rifles definitely packed a punch, and goddamn were they ripping through enemies. And I mean that in the literal sense, because this game is really gory. Limbs get ripped off, heads explode, whole enemies get gooified. It's really cool to see, especially in slow motion during VATS. Oh yeah, we need to talk about VATS. A really big and controversial change in Fallout 4 was the VATS system. In previous entries, when you entered VATS, the gameplay would pause, allowing you to select what body parts you want to aim for and shoot. Whereas in Fallout 4, they implemented a slow motion mechanic instead, which in my opinion works a million times better, especially since the percentages of how likely you are to hit each individual limb change as the target is moving. So for example, you can enter VATS and your enemy could be behind cover, and you can wait a couple of seconds for them to move out of cover so you can aim for that critical headshot. Whereas in the older Fallout games, you'd have to enter VATS, see that you can't hit that person, leave VATS, wait a couple of seconds, re-enter VATS, pick your target, shoot. And this just makes the gameplay feel so much smoother and more fluid. Also, it's absolutely terrifying when you enter VATS and you see a Deathclaw running at you in slow motion and you're just praying that you don't miss and you at least get to stun the Deathclaw so you can turn around and run away. The weapon variety in Fallout 4 is also quite impressive. Every weapon type has multiple variants, such as the shotgun, which has a combat shotgun, which is automatic. You get a pump shotgun, you get a double barrel shotgun, you get the idea. But the thing that makes the weapons in Fallout 4 impressive is the legendary weapons. These are unique one-off weapons that have added bonuses to them. For example, my personal favorite is the legendary baseball bat. It looks like a normal baseball bat, right? But it has a small chance that upon impact, it's going to send the enemy flying. And when that happens, the bat makes a home run crowd cheering sound. I was so tempted to completely respec my character into a melee only build just so I could do a full playthrough of using just the bat. So it's always worth looking around for loot because you never know, you might find a legendary weapon. And they can really help you to specialize in your character build because certain weapons can do things like adding sneak damage. So if you're going for a sneaky, stealthy build, this weapon would be for you. And like the absolute king of segues, we are perfectly going to segue into the next point, crafting and upgrades. This one simple gameplay system has ruined previous Fallout games for me. The ability to customize and upgrade your weapons is an absolute must in any future Bethesda game. When I spoke about weapon variety a second ago, this is where it really comes from. The staggering amount of changes and upgrades and customizations that you can do to basically any weapon you want. For example, the hunting rifle. Add a silencer, a thermal scope, a marksman stock, and change the ammo type to 50 cal. Boom. Perfect sniper rifle. But you need something a little bit close range? Well, that same hunting rifle, just add a short barrel, remove the stock, and boom, you have basically a shotgun. This system is so complex that it really gives you the freedom to make your guns whatever you want. And these upgrades also apply to the legendary weapons, like that baseball bat that I mentioned. I put spinning blades on it, which inflicted bleeding damage. And this crafting and upgrading system isn't limited just to weapons. You can also upgrade your armor, but more importantly, your power armor. Different paint jobs provide different bonuses, and you can install different mods that completely change how you use the power armor. For example, you can upgrade the legs of the power armor to give you more power capacity, but there are a few more cool upgrades, such as adding a goddamn jetpack to your power armor so you can fly around. And you can really pick and choose how you make your power armor. Since different power armors have different stats, you can really mix and match what you want to do. For example, you can have the T51 legs, the T60 arms and torso, and then the X01 helmet, which can really help you make some custom, unique looking power armors. And how you get the materials to upgrade your weapons and armor links really well to exploration and looting, because you'll find random bits of junk that will give you the raw materials that you need for the upgrades. Basically, it works the same as for base building. Here comes another incredible segue. Speaking of base building. I know it's a really hot take, but I really enjoyed base building in Fallout 4. It provided a nice change of pace to the exploration and the ghoul killing. And yes, I know it's a little bit clunky with the placement and how some things line up, but once it clicks, it's really fun. And like I mentioned in the last section, base building goes hand in hand with exploration and looting. Since it's the same as it is with crafting and upgrading your weapons, in order to build settlements, you need to collect junk and raw materials in order to build structures and furniture. And this kind of forces you to take your time when you're exploring. Be on the lookout because you might find that fan that has the screws you need for a weapon upgrade, or that TV diner tray because it'll give you the aluminium that you need for that new generator for your settlement. But the one issue that I had with the system is I wish there was more. Yes, you can build some cool houses and fill them with furniture, but there isn't that many types of furniture. Like you can have a sofa and a chair and a table and a bed and some lockers. And that's about it. I really wish that they just added more. And I'm pretty sure the DLC for this game covers this. However, we are reviewing the base game, so I'm not going to include that. But just to quickly explain what the base building is. Throughout the map, you'll find plots of land that have a workbench on them. Once you interact with the workbench, you'll enter the building mode. And this is where you can use your raw resources to build the settlement. You need to provide your settlement with food, water, electricity, and defenses. And once you fulfill these needs, new settlers will start coming into your settlement and populating it. But again, I wish this was a little bit more complex. Like if each settler had their own individual needs. For example, one settler would want some sort of entertainment and another one would want some sort of a market in your settlement, which would kind of give you more of a purpose to expand your settlement once you fulfill the basic needs. Again, I just wish the system was a little bit more fleshed out. Like imagine you could create specific settlements that specialized in one area. For example, the airport settlement could be like your research facility where you had scientists who would research like upgrades to your settlements, and then you had a farm settlement that provided food that would get exported to your other settlements, and then Sanctuary Hills could be like the hub where all your settlers live and trade over there. Also, I really wish there was a way of simply moving the settlers from one settlement to another. So instead of having 10 settlements with 2 settlers in each one, you can build one settlement that's like really heavily populated with all your settlers in it. And I know there are mods available that sort this issue out, but however, we are reviewing the base game again, so I can't include that. And I know I've been complaining quite a lot about the base building and I've put it in the good section, but that's because I had a good time with the base building and I see the potential that this system could have. And it feels like Bethesda used Fallout 4 as just like a trial run for the base building, and then they kind of fleshed it out more for Fallout 76 and the upcoming Starfield. Enemy variety. There is a decent amount of variety in Fallout 4 when it comes to enemies. From the humanoid synths that look like robots from iRobot to the absolutely terrifying Deathclaws that will rip you to shreds in one hit. And to add an extra layer of complexity, each type of enemy has its own subclasses to increase the variety. Like you've got the standard Deathclaw, and then you've got the Alpha Deathclaw, which is more powerful than the standard one. And then you've got a glowing Deathclaw, which is riddled with radiation and it does radiation damage. And then there's a Savage Deathclaw, which you find in a specific quest. And let's just say that quest is absolutely terrifying and I was actually pooing my pants playing it. And then there's a Chameleon Deathclaw, which can change colors and go invisible. So yeah, that's a nice jump scare for you. And all these varieties are available across any enemy type. Oh, and to top it all off, you also get legendary enemies that drop legendary loot. And these enemies are stronger than your normal ones, and they can mutate throughout the fight to implement a bonus, which can do many things like implement a new damage type like poison damage, or just allow them to go absolutely crazy mode. Like I said, the legendary enemies are worth killing because they drop legendary loot. And you can tell Bethesda put in a lot of work designing these enemies just from the unique movesets every enemy type has. Mole rats, for example, bury themselves and jump out at you from a flanking position. Ghouls will sprint at you like the World War Z zombies. And the super mutant suiciders will, well, you can probably guess from the name. Also, enemies that were featured in previous Fallout games have had the movesets expanded. Going back to the Deathclaw, in Fallout 4, a Deathclaw has a ranged attack where it picks up a boulder and throws it at you. So you can't really just hide on high ground and cheese it. Companions. The companions in Fallout 4 are simply great. Each one is unique with their own personalities, quest lines, and they also have their own special perks. Of course, there are standout companions like Nick Valentine, a synth detective who has the personality of a famous detective who lived before the Great War, and he can help you with his hacking abilities so you can break into any terminal you want, which is amazing because I suck at hacking in this game. Dogmeat, which is just the most adorable doggo you've ever seen, and he can sniff out loot and fetch it for you just because he's such a good boy. And then you've got Codsworth, who's your robot butler who served you before the Great War, and his special perk, well, he can burn enemies with a flamethrower. And those three were my personal favorites, but I did stick with Nick Valentine throughout the majority of the playthrough just because of his hacking ability, and his snarky comments are just too good to miss out on. There is a morality system in Fallout 4 where your actions will affect your relationship with your companions. Each companion has their own beliefs and ideologies, so they will all react differently to your actions. For example, Paladin Dance. He's from the Brotherhood of Steel, which absolutely hates synths, as opposed to Nick Valentine, who's a synth himself. So if you go on a killing spree and kill a bunch of synths, Paladin Dance would really like it, whereas Nick Valentine, not so much. And building up a relationship with your companion is quite important because it will unlock new dialogue, new quest lines, and also improve the perks. And the quest lines that you unlock are specific to that companion, and these quest lines are really good because they help you get closer with your companion and understand their motivations a little bit more. In Nick's example, if you get really close to him, you'll get sent out on a quest to find Nick's girlfriend's pre-war personality killer. Makes sense? And the killer turned himself into a ghoul before the bombs even dropped in order to extend his lifespan, and he locked himself away in a secret bunker somewhere in the map. But he left clues to his whereabouts that are scattered on holotapes, which are hidden in the world. And once you collect them all, you can find where he is and get your revenge. Does that make sense? It's a neat little side quest that helps you to get to know Nick a little bit more. Mods. You simply cannot mention a Bethesda game without mentioning the mod support. The mods for Fallout 4 are absolutely insane. From something as simple as making your junk not have any weight so you can carry more of it, which is good because you will carry a lot of junk, to mods which completely change the world and the enemies and make Fallout 4 a survival horror experience. It just shows how crazy the community behind Fallout 4 is, since they are willing to fix issues and spend hundreds of hours developing mods to bring new content to the game for free. And the best part is Bethesda completely embraces the mods, since most other games have a mod launcher already built into them and you can just access it from a main menu, making downloading and installing mods super easy and more accessible, especially to the people that are more casual gamers and wouldn't even know where to begin with downloading mods. Roleplay. I'm gonna start by praising Bethesda for the super unique and complex character creator, and I say unique because it starts off in the bathroom with you looking at your own reflection in the mirror, and the female character that you can play as is stood behind you, so you can just swap between them. And they even have voice lines to complement the changes that you're making to your character. And the character creator is quite complex. You can change almost anything about your character, and some of the character builds that I've seen online are just amazing. From Nicolas Cage to Waluigi. For my playthrough, I tried to get a bit more creative, and I came up with Giga Chad, who looked pretty handsome if I say so myself. And once you create your character, then you move on to the perk tree, which is yet another big controversial change to Fallout 4. And the reception to this change is mixed. Again, you either hate it or you love it. And I think I love it. it. In the old Fallout games, when you leveled up, you just get 20 skill points and you dump them into a list of skills. These skills would go from 0 to 100. Closer to 100 that you are, the better you are at said skill. However, in Fallout 4, it works a little bit different. There's a massive list of perks and each perk has multiple tiers. So as you improve a perk, it gets better, but usually the last tier has a special bonus. For example, the lockpicking perk. The first 3 tiers allow you to pick more difficult locks, but once you get to the 4th tier, your bobby pin will never break, making lockpicking really easy. And since you only get 1 skill point per level, the leveling in Fallout 4 feels way more important because instead of dumping 15 skill points into, say, bartering or lockpicking, you only have 1 skill point and you have to choose what to invest into. And this brings me onto the role-playing element of Fallout 4. There are so many character builds that you can make, and the perk tree really helps you to specialize in that character build. For example, Giga Chad had the gun nut perk maxed out, meaning that I could put any upgrade I want on my weapons. But the one that I cared about was the suppressors. And then I combined that with the ninja perk, which multiplies how much sneak damage your character does up to 4 times. And then I combined all of that with the perk that gives silenced weapons a double damage multiplier. So now I had a fully silenced sniper rifle, which done basically like 10 times as much damage as it usually does. So my sneak attacks would kill a Deathclaw in like 4 shots. And the game allows for all sorts of different playstyles. Of course, I went for the sneaky sniper, but if you want, you can do a fully pacifist run where you can just talk your way through every situation and never kill a single person. I really love games that do this. Now we've got all the good things out of the way, let's talk about the bad. AI. AI in Fallout 4 is quite bad. Enemies will just stand there whilst you're blasting them in the face with a shotgun and just not react. This happened to me a lot, especially with the rad scorpions. They would pop up from under the ground in their flanking position, but then just stand there, frozen. And I would just shoot them, just keep shooting until I hit a critical hit, or I crippled one of their limbs, which would cause them to unfreeze, pop back under the ground, reappear, and then just freeze again. But it only happened with rat scorpions. It was really weird. I'm not sure why. Also, the ghouls just have terrible AI. They would all line up single file and just run at you in a straight line. So if you were indoors, which you were most of the time when you encountered ghouls, they would all just be running down one corridor, one after another in a straight line. And you wouldn't even have to aim. You just hold fire and you just mow them down, which I find especially disappointing because ghouls are kind of like a creepy, scary enemy, and if done right, if they flanked you and they jump scared you and stuff, they would have made for some really cool enemies. And the human enemies are no better. Yes, they would seek cover, but once they're behind cover, they would just sit there. So if their head was poking out from over the cover, you could just shoot the enemy in the head and they would just wouldn't react, wouldn't move, wouldn't shoot back. Nothing. It happened multiple times where I had my sniper rifle and I was just shooting a guy in the head 3 times and he was just there staring at me, and then his head would explode because I landed a critical hit. But then again, it is a Bethesda game, so what do you really expect? They are the masters of bad AI, and just because it's expected from them at this point doesn't mean it's okay. I'm just saying 7 years later and it's still in Fallout 4. Side quests. I was really torn between putting side quests on the good or the bad. I just couldn't decide. This is mainly because the side quests in Fallout 4 are just such a mixed bag. On one hand, you've got amazing side quests like Hole in the Wall, where you uncover the mystery of a vault that's still operational now, but it's slowly falling apart. Or you have smaller, funny side quests, like the Hunt for the Treasure of Jamaica Plains, which I'm not going to spoil because there's a really big build up to it, and once you see the climax, you'll be laughing. But then on the other hand of side quests, you just have terrible fetch quests, like Preston sending you to liberate another settlement.
Settlement has asked for our help. Another settlement has sent word that they need our help. I got word of a settlement that needs our help.
And after you've done about 5 of these, you would just avoid Preston because they would become so annoying. And these side quests are especially disappointing because they miss that Bethesda touch, the handcrafted environments, and the carefully written story. Instead, Preston tells you, hey, this settlement needs help. You go there, you talk to the settlers, they tell you that they are being terrorized by ghouls or raiders. Then you go to their hideout, kill them all, come back, tell the settlers, hey, I did it. And they go, hey, cool, we'll join the Minutemen. It seems like Bethesda put a lot of work into a number of side quests, and then when they were done, they realized that they don't have enough side quests to populate the entire map, and they just couldn't be bothered to make more side quests. So they just pressed the procedurally generated fetch quest button. And before you come at me for whether the quests are actually procedurally generated or not, if they aren't procedurally generated, they might as well be with how little effort and work was put into them. And just to really rub salt in the wound, when you talk to Preston and he sends you on another mission to liberate yet another settlement, he'll sometimes use the voice line, I have something a little bit different for you today. No, Preston, you don't. It's just the same fetch quest over and over and over again. UI. I don't really understand why the Pip-Boy UI has not been changed since Fallout 3 in 2008. It's clunky, it's hard to navigate, and it's impossible to find whatever you're looking for. Yes, the inventory is split into categories, but there's no way of sorting the inventory. Like for weapons, sorting by the weapons that put out the most damage, or a recently added filter for holotapes and letters. So if you find a letter or a holotape out in the world and you decide to pick it up, you've got about 3 seconds to memorize the name of it. After that, it's gone. And good luck finding it in your Pip-Boy, because by the end of the game, you'll have thousands of letters and holotapes. So have fun scrolling through all of that and trying to figure out which one you just picked up and which one was relevant to the quest you need. The UI is so bad that sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night sweating and screaming because I just had a nightmare about it. And yes, I know you can get mods that fix the UI and make it much easier to use. However, we are reviewing the base game, so I can't really include that. Technical difficulties. You know, in the good section of the video, I said that you can't talk about a Bethesda game without bringing mod support up. Well, the same goes for technical difficulties in the bad section of this video. Bethesda games are notorious for the poor performance. And yes, the game doesn't drop frames for me as much now as it did when I first played it when the game first released. But I think that's just because I have a beefier PC now compared to 7 years ago. But the bugs and glitches are still plentiful in Fallout 4. Characters would just glitch through the map all the time, T-posing. In the middle of dialogue, certain characters would just not say their voice lines, but the conversation will carry on playing, which was really awkward to watch. Basically, it went like this. Okay, so how do I get to Vault 81? Okay, great. I'm gonna get on it right now. And this happened on multiple occasions with different characters, so it's not like it's just one character that was bugged out. Luckily, I had subtitles on so I could still understand what was happening in the conversation. But yeah, pretty weird. There was quite a lot of graphical bugs as well, where some textures wouldn't load in, and there would be really bad popping, especially when you can see long distances away. Like the missions where you're flying in the vertibird. Again, I know people are like, oh, but it's just part of Bethesda games. Well, to be fair, it's not really acceptable in modern gaming. And I would say I expect better from Bethesda, but I think we all saw what happened with Fallout 76. But Starfield is coming out soon, so maybe third time's the charm, Bethesda. The clapped. The main difference between things that I put in clapped compared to bad is that things in the bad section can quite easily be fixed with patches and updates. Think ironing out bugs and glitches. Whereas the things in clapped are issues with the game that are basically unfixable, or it would take a lot of work to fix that issue, and no studio would be willing to do that for a 7-year-old game. Think redesigning systems or rewriting the story. Basically, changing things in the clap section would result in you having a completely different game to what we originally got. Story and endings. Probably the most disappointing part of Fallout 4 is the main story and the endings. So let's start with the story. I absolutely hate when games do this, and if you watched my Cyberpunk 2077 review, you know exactly what I'm about to say. If you haven't, make sure to go watch it. I'll link it down below. Games that create a full sense of urgency. This drives me absolutely crazy because I tend to get really immersed in my games, and this is that one thing that just shatters all immersion for me. The story of Fallout 4 is quite simple. You get into a vault because the nukes are about to drop, you get frozen in a cryo chamber, someone comes along and kidnaps your son and brutally murders your wife, and you're unable to do anything about it because you're stuck in your own cryo chamber. And once you get out of the vault, you're tasked with finding your kid and avenging your wife. Simple, but it's a pretty urgent task if you ask me. So why the hell is your character out there building settlements and liberating other settlements because the Minutemen need help again?
I've gotten word about a settlement that's being threatened by raiders.
The main story is entirely focused on you finding your son, and we can even see your character get physically upset whenever he talks about the son because he's so distraught by what happened and he's so urgently looking to get his son back. But then the game gives you 1,000,001 side quests that are totally unrelated to what you're doing, and it just ruins all pressure that the main story is trying to build for the game, which just kind of ruins the immersion for me. And this isn't just a Fallout 4 specific issue. This happens in basically every single Fallout game. You leave the vault because something bad happened and then you have to try and find someone. But the worlds are just so well crafted and explorable. Is that even a word? It is now. It just completely distracts you from the main story. So other than the main story creating a full sense of urgency, what other issues are there? The pacing of the story. I'll be honest with you, the first 2/3 of the main story are kind of boring. You're just going from place to place, asking a person, hey, have you seen my son? Hey, do you know who took my son? And the people are always like, Yeah, I'll help you in return for this. So you just get sent on all these fetch quests and doing this and doing that. But the final third of the main story is where it explodes. Let me tell you, I was hooked. Okay, this is a spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't played Fallout 4 yet. Either skip this part or pause the video, go play the game and come back and watch this bit. Okay, so that's the spoiler warning done. We can carry on. Once you find your son in the Institute, the game completely changes the narrative. Going from a detective kidnapping goose chase to an all-out sci-fi wacky story, and I loved it. I honestly couldn't put the controller down because I was just so hooked on that part of the story. So if you can push through the first 2/3 of the main story, it will really pay off. Until the endings. There are 4 different endings in Fallout 4, and these are determined by what faction you ally with for the last third of the story. And don't get me wrong, the quests leading up to the ending are so cool. If you pick the Brotherhood of Steel ending, you'll get to build a massive robot that helps to assault the Institute with you. But once all of that's done, the actual ending of Fallout 4 is just a 20-second cutscene. And once the cutscene is done, the game just kind of carries on like nothing just happened. And it just feels so rushed and abrupt that I actually paused the game and googled what just happened. Was that the ending? Surely not. And I understand why Bethesda did this, because the main issue that people had with the story previously is that once you got to the ending, the game would end. So with Fallout 4, they tried to allow you to carry on exploring the world once the main story's done. But it just feels really poorly executed and there's literally no payoff to ending the story. Dialogue tree. A huge change to the Fallout formula was definitely the dialogue tree. And in my humble opinion, I think this failed miserably for 2 reasons. Bethesda tried to make a more streamlined and accessible dialogue tree for all the new mainstream players who would be trying Fallout for the first time. And they didn't want the new players to feel intimidated by the old school, more hardcore, more complex dialogue tree. So they simplified it into 4 options. Nice, sarcastic, mean, or question, which leads to the dialogue options being way too oversimplified. It was also really annoying because the new system only displays like a couple of words that your character is going to say, so you don't really know the full extent of what your character will say and how they'll say it. The amount of times that you'd select an option thinking that your character is going to be nice and friendly when they say it, but instead they say it really sarcastically, which just aggravates the other person. This is a bit of an issue, especially if you're trying to do like a pacifist run, since you can't really trust what your character is going to say. And the second reason why Bethesda simplified the dialogue tree was because for the first time in Bethesda's history, we got a voice protagonist. And Todd Howard revealed that Fallout 4 would have more voice lines than Fallout 3 and Skyrim combined. Over 110,000 voice lines were recorded, which means that in order to make this somewhat manageable during the development, dialogue had to be a little bit more simplified, which kind of led Fallout to shooting itself in the foot. And you can tell Bethesda learned from their mistakes, since Fallout 76 and Starfield have the much superior old dialogue tree, which just allows for better dialogue, writing, and roleplay. Engine. I have no idea why, but Bethesda decided that it's going to be a good idea to use the creation engine for Fallout 4. And this was a stupid idea because Bethesda used this very engine to develop Skyrim, which came out in 2011. And the development on Skyrim started in 2008, meaning that this engine has been around since at least 2008. And this was just a terrible decision, because as the saying goes, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. The best developers in the world can only do so much with an old, outdated engine. And Fallout 4 really shows that. Anything from the wacky physics to the completely dead behind the eyes facial animations really give you the feeling of playing a facelifted Fallout 3, which isn't great since Fallout 3 came out in 2008. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and pretend I'm an engine expert and I know what I'm talking about, but I'm just going to say that Fallout 4 feels really outdated in certain aspects. And I'm not talking about 2022 standards, I'm talking about 2015 standards. Focus of the game. I think the aspects of Fallout 4 that Bethesda focused on when developing the game is what makes it so controversial, like I mentioned at the start of the video if you were paying attention. Fallout games are known for their incredible stories and world building, so it seems strange that Bethesda took a step back from focusing on what makes the game great and instead focused on making a more mainstream and accessible game. FPS game. And yes, Fallout 4 is not a half bad FPS, since I did put the gunplay in the good section. However, that's not what Fallout fans want from Fallout. They don't want intense explosions and crazy gunplay and shooting. What they want instead is great dialogue and actions and consequences. So at the same time, Bethesda's greatest achievement with Fallout 4 is also its greatest downfall, because they were brave enough to innovate and try new things with Fallout 4 to make it feel fresh. But unfortunately, not all of these new features and changes worked in Fallout 4's favor, which as a result led hardcore Fallout fans to to dislike Fallout 4. And I understand this is a really hard choice for any game developer. Do you make a game to please your OG hardcore fans? Or do you make a more casual mainstream game to attract new audiences in? I think it's really hard to find the perfect balance. That's why personally I'm not going too hard on Bethesda with Fallout 4, because I think it took a lot of balls to do what they did. Especially with a franchise like Fallout, where if you look at how far Fallout has come from Fallout 1, the evolution is massive. Which personally makes me really excited to see what they do with Fallout 5 when it finally releases and I can play it from the comfort of my retirement home in 50 years time. So to summarize, is Fallout 4 a bad game? No, it's actually a really good open world RPG with plenty of content and loads of role-playing possibilities. But is Fallout 4 a good Fallout game? Personally, I'd argue no. It's not, especially when you compare it to Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3, which just absolutely nailed that Fallout formula. I do admire Bethesda for trying something new and trying to make the game more accessible to attract more audiences, but I feel like they were so focused on doing that, but they lost track of what makes a Fallout game a Fallout game. But yeah, thank you guys for watching my Fallout 4 review. The support on the previous video is absolutely overwhelming, and I would be lying if I said I didn't cry in my shower, just overfilled with joy. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you leave a like and you subscribe and comment your thoughts down below. Do you agree with the things that I've said in this video? If not, then please comment, because I'd love to hear your opinions and prove why I'm wrong. Whenever we finish a game review, I'll do a poll in my Discord, so you guys get to vote on what video I make next. And the current winner seems to be Deathloop, so it looks like we're doing a video on that. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all and see you in the next one. Mwah.